I wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone who's organized the talk. I mean, the work that you guys have done to get this, the way it's worked out, has been really remarkable. And we'd like to thank you for all the work that you've done to make this happen. And can you put that time back on the clock? No, I'm just joking. Just joking. My talk is on the risk of empathy, which is, kind of a crazy idea for a talk, I think, in that it's always hard to talk about empathy without really defining it in a way that we can actually practice it. Empathy, in my mind, is trying to put ourselves in the shoes of others and to see what their perspective is, to understand what someone else's perspective is when you're facing them. And what I find very difficult about that, and what I think a lot of students find difficult about that is, well, then how do I put that into practice? How can I constantly do that all the time? It's difficult. It's not something that it's something that I think everyone has to work at and that we need to work through. In the field where I work, which is international health or global health or international development, it's especially tricky because there's so much commentary about it. I started here in '99 and graduated in 2003. And in this very room, I had a teacher for geography, Timmy Meyer, who some of you may know. Yes. I got a B. I didn't get an A. I got a B. But she was incredible. She's incredible. And I talked to her right before I came here. And she would start out every lecture, a class called the Geography of Development. And every class she would start out by saying, what is development? I don't know if she still does that, but we still joke about that. She'd always say, what is development? And we would rack our brains, what is development? What is it? Is it art, what we think development is? Is it what people in Haiti think development is? What is it? And I think what I started to come to realize after going to Haiti during my time in undergrad, going back there, reading the work of others, but especially listening to the people that we were working with, was that development was really about making sure we listened to local voices. The people on the ground really know what their needs are, but they also understand that all these catchphrases like trade, not aid, or micro-lending, or all these things are all they're all put out there as a marketing idea or an idea to sell a concept, but it wasn't necessarily what they were looking for. And what I found that they were looking for more than anything was someone who would listen to them and listen to their own voices when coming through with programs or projects to try and help people down there. And I think what I also found too was that people were more concerned about questions of rights. That why should some child who's born in Haiti not have the same basic rights that someone born here is? Why is there a birthright right? Just because I was born in Virginia, ended up going to high school in Concord, Massachusetts, a very difficult town, difficult upbringing. Why was it that because I was born where I was born, that I was born with certain rights? I didn't have to worry about housing. I didn't have to worry about school. I didn't have to worry about going to soccer practice, all these things that I enjoyed. But it also meant that I had this enormous privilege that to me is both a burden but also an enormous blessing. And to me, I thought that I needed to, and I think many of you feel that way too, the students here and the speakers, that we need to then look at how can we help others to achieve those same rights. Not the right to an iPhone, but the right to basic things. Schooling, food on the table, the right to be able to live in peace. And the organization where I've been working for the last 8 years since graduating is the St. Boniface Haiti Foundation. I went down there for the first time as an undergrad during a J-term class. Coach Quinn, I think, will appreciate this. The former UConn basketball coach, coached a J-term course here for 4 weeks, and he let me skip half of it to go to Haiti. So I guess he felt very seriously about the curriculum that he let me leave for 2 weeks to go to Haiti. But it was the best 2 weeks that I could have possibly experienced. And I went there originally to teach English, which I think a lot of undergrads, it's teaching the inner cities, to teach for America, or maybe go abroad and teach English if you don't really know exactly what you want to do. And for me, I was looking at both those things and looking at how I could be of service. And when I went to Haiti, I realized that I wanted to be of use there. And so I went back to teach English. And I thought I was going to be an English teacher for a year, and that would be it. Similar to Evan, I think Evan said he was going to be there for 6 months and then leave. But during that year, I started to hear about at the hospital that the foundation was supporting that we were having an enormous HIV crisis, an AIDS crisis. And we were having people dying left and right from a disease where there were medications available here in the United States and in other developed countries where you could actually get treatment for HIV and that your life could be prolonged. And for some strange reason, and I would argue perhaps a lack of empathy and not looking at the disease as something that your mother could get, or it could be your brother with it and they weren't getting the meds they were getting. It was some sort of other group that was getting HIV in the developing world that was just a bunch of statistics. What I was seeing on the ground were mothers and fathers were dying in the prime of their lives and leaving kids who couldn't go to school. Couldn't go to school because their parents couldn't afford it, and they were leaving kids who couldn't have a mother and father growing up. What we ended up doing, and was a little ambitious as an English teacher, was we ended up looking at how could we find funding to provide antiretroviral drugs to those suffering with HIV in our community. People in our community were saying when they got HIV, they didn't want to hear it because it was a straight shot to the graveyard. That was it. There's no reason to know about a disease that you're just going to die from if there's no treatment for it. That's what they felt. And through work of the group where Evan works, Partners in Health and others, we were able to find help to get antiretrovirals to people living in the community. Those antiretrovirals prolonged people's lives. They did real work. They may not have been, quote unquote, cost effective to policy experts. But when I was there last week, I met one of our patients who's been on antiretrovirals and HIV positive for the last 8 years, and she was talking all about her daughter's graduation that she would have never seen otherwise. And I think when we look at that, the issue of empathy and the risk of spending funds on a group of people who people think should, maybe we should look at how we can do it in a more cost-effective way so they don't get the meds, but they could get some other help. To me, that's really the risk, that we're risking people's lives. And that's what I've found on the ground. I wanted to show you some pictures from our work and talk a little bit about them as well. This is the area where our hospital is, right here in the center. And this is the area where we work. Bill McKibben talks a lot about global warming. People have been talking about environmental problems, deforestation, those kind of things. Haiti, in a recent study, was named as the country that's most vulnerable to global warming in the world. And this area has been somewhat reforested, but deforestation is a major issue where we are. And the environment really plays on, and the social structures really play on what kind of services people can access in this extremely poor community of Fondé-Blanc. Now, this picture is taken from January 12th, 2010. This is actually across the street from my in-laws, who are here with me today. This is right across the street from their house. Their whole neighborhood was destroyed. This is an area called Carrefour, which is right near the epicenter. And the reason I show this picture, too, is I know the quality is not great on the photo, and I'm not a great photographer. But for me, what I think is lost sometimes in all these news stories and in policy decisions is these are real people. These are people's neighbors. These are people's daughters. These are people's sons. These are people's parents, grandparents who were killed. I mean, 250,000 is a lot of people. It's very hard to get a grasp of what that means that in 55 seconds, 250,000 people died. This is the context of Haiti that I think is really important to understand. This is someone who's come back from the earthquake, coming out to a rural area to try and get by after being displaced from the earthquake. And this actually was in a story in the New York Times, so I should give credit to the photographer. But what you see here is just a bunch of rocks. She's planting her field in a bunch of rocks to try and survive. And with the lowest crop yields in the world, she's in real trouble. So the context that we're working in is a very difficult one. This is after the earthquake, coming into that context where there were people in this really poor village who had a hospital that was working pretty well with St. Boniface, and Suddenly we were out in a cornfield after the earthquake with a BlackBerry and Googling, trying to figure out how to get GPS coordinates on a BlackBerry, and I couldn't really figure it out, and commandeering land to try and land these helicopters. And suddenly we're talking to the Navy about trying to bring patients out to this rural hospital. And what happened, and the reason I want to talk about this story is, what ended up happening was that the Navy had a ship out in the bay in Port-au-Prince after the earthquake called the Comfort. And they were receiving a ton of patients from the capital because there weren't enough services for the health care that was necessary for these people. And we were getting all these emails from the ship saying, you know, we don't have anybody who can take in these patients. And we were saying, well, we don't really have anybody who can take people with spinal cord injury or traumatic brain injury. And they were saying, well, there's nobody else, though. There's no other hospital, so who do we turn to? And in our minds, we said, well, policy-wise, it would be a stupid decision to take the patients. We were going to take them for a long period of time. We didn't have a history of taking these kind of patients with these kinds of injuries. We were a small rural hospital. But our staff, our Haitian staff, had the empathy to say, we have no choice. We need to take them in, and we'll have to figure it all out afterwards. We need to treat them as our family members and do what we can. And so patients started arriving. And there's a couple community members here, too. I don't think that Bluetooth headset works really necessarily, but it's cool. It's a cool scene. But those are community members who are really bringing in patients to make sure they're not getting paid to do that work. They're making sure that people could get the help they needed. This is one of our patients, Ismaeline. Ismaeline broke her femur. None of the other hospitals felt they were prepared to take her. Again, we started trying to recruit from all over to see what we could do. But Ismaeline is back with her family and doing really well. This picture, I think, is really indicative of the work that we try to do in development and answering that question that Timmy asks all the time. To us, it's really about bringing skills to the local community so that they can now take care of services that can be offered within their own communities. The man on the left is actually from this rural village, and he only has a middle school education. And we had a University of Toronto physical therapist who came down and has lived there for the last year and a half in Fondé-Blois and has been teaching everybody how to do physical therapy for patients. And this patient actually has spinal cord injury. And he's doing physical therapy with only a middle school education, but has gotten all of this training to be able to do it even when Priya's traveling and it doesn't matter that she's not in the country, he's able to do the rehab. This is a picture of a patient with cholera. Some of you may be aware of the situation in Haiti, but Haiti now has the highest cholera incidence in the world. Over 6,000 people have died in just a year of it being introduced into the country. It wasn't there before. So I show this slide too because I think the earthquake brought unprecedented amounts of attention to Haiti. I mean, clearly it did. Over 50% of the American people gave to Haiti following the earthquake. But the needs are enormous. And if we look at it from an issue of empathy and looking at, even though there's a lot of resources that have gone in, the needs are still there. It can't be just seen as an emergency and then we're done. We need to look at how we can accompany these patients, as Evan said in his talk, how we can accompany these patients going forward. I always throw in a picture like this because I think it's always amazing to see a kid being weighed like that. But this is a maternal and child health program that we have, looking at trying to take care of mothers and children who would otherwise not get care that they need. And I wanted to just close with two stories. The first one is about Wilgie Dorsonville. Wilgie is one of our patients with spinal cord injury. Who, I think from a public health perspective, again, spinal cord injury was not something that made a lot of sense for us. In that, patients were going to stay for a very long time, and we didn't have a lot of history working with these kind of patients. But again, our staff insisted we needed to figure out what we're going to do. And Wilgie was in his class at the time of the earthquake. And the building collapsed on top of him while I was in school. And he was trapped. He got sent to a group working with the University of Miami, and then was sent back out to us. He was helicoptered out to us. He stayed with us for 9 months at the hospital. And Wilgie, and we kept being told all these weird statistics that I would challenge everyone to challenge when they're hearing these statistics and they don't sound like they're true. people would say, oh, people with spinal cord injury, after an earthquake like this in a country like Haiti, you can't give them 12 months. They won't live past 12 months. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. And that's the average, so don't get too invested in their care. And Wilgie, really, and I should say that we haven't lost any spinal cord injury patients, 30, as of now, a year and a half later. But Wilgie really epitomized what we were trying to do with the program. His family said that he couldn't do anything for them anymore, and they had to abandon him. And he said, well, I can still be productive, and there was a lot of work with our Haitian social workers who went out to the family to talk to the family to make sure that they could accept them again back into the family. Wilgie is actually now back as class president of his class in Port-au-Prince. And it's actually him who sent, the quality is tough, I know, but you can see his hand actually holding up the picture. He sent me this picture of himself because he had figured out how to do the email and attach photos and everything and send them to the States. He wanted to show me this picture of himself back in his class. And his family now sees him as a productive person within the family, and they actually push him because the hills are so steep, he's pretty independent, but they push him to class to make sure he gets there because they now see him as a really important part of their family again. I'll close with a difficult one that I think is really important. Prisons in developing countries, I think, are something that people don't talk about a lot. You hear about women and children, you hear about people with malaria, you hear about people with tuberculosis, HIV, you hear about those things. But prisons are kind of something we always say in Haiti, when you turn over the rock, you find a lot more than you thought you were going to find underneath it. When you look into the difficult parts of any society, like prisons, you really find difficult things. There's actually, in a room, I don't know, the size of that room back there where the engine room of this room there are 30 people in there, 30 men. And they have to rotate who stands and sits and sleeps. They go for a long time without a trial. Sometimes they don't even know really why they've been put in the prison in the first place. And they invited us out to meet with them. The community leaders invited us to meet with them. And we were kind of worried about what they were going to do. Were they going to yell insults? What kind of a place was this going to be because they had been barred up like this? And the first thing they said to us was, we need another bucket. We can't just have one bucket in the corner for all of our toilet needs. We need one more bucket. And that's not necessarily a policy decision to get another bucket, but it was a question of trying to figure out what they needed. And suddenly our local community was finding underwear, was finding buckets, was finding food, was making soup for the prisoners. It really became an amazing scene. But I would say, the other exciting thing that we've done, and I see I'm running out of time here, is that we've actually had surgical visits for the prisoners. This is the first time in the history of the Lakai prison where they've actually had surgery for the prisoners. Many of them had been suffering with all kinds of ailments in the prison and had never gotten the surgery that they needed. And I know that it doesn't necessarily sound like something that USAID is going to talk about, a prison surgery program, but I think we all need to start thinking about how can we look at policy issues from an empathetic perspective, even if it risks being called not sustainable or not cost effective. So thank you, and I really appreciate all of your time. Thank you.